We know that a variety of methods, strategies, and techniques are used for data collection in research, including social science research. All of these data collection methods and techniques have their advantages and their limitations, and some techniques are suitable for collecting one type of data and others for another type of data. So in the current presentation, we will discuss the comparative strengths or merits and limitations of two most important and most frequently used data collection tools in social science research. That is the semi-structured interviews and the scale-based questionnaires. Generally, the semi-structured interviews are used in qualitative studies, while the scale-based questionnaires are generally used in quantitative research studies. So, first, semi-structured interviews. What are these? Semi-structured interviews are basically qualitative research techniques or method where the interviewer follows a set of predefined questions. But there is some level of flexibility in terms of exploring new ideas that come as a result of the respondents' answers to the questions or to the data that is incoming. So there is, you can say, a list of predefined questions or set of questions, but at the same time, there is some flexibility of probes and prompts and additional questions. On the other hand, scale-based questionnaire is basically a quantitative research method of data collection, where the data that is collected is basically on a structured basis, where so the responses use fixed scale, such as the Likert scale, and the aim of this type of tool or the questionnaire is to basically measure attitudes or perceptions or behaviors of the respondents. Now, there are some criteria where we can make use either of one data collection tool, such as the semi-structured interviews or the scale-based questionnaires. The criteria actually include, for example, data type. So what type of data do we need? So if we need qualitative data or narratives, we will make use of semi-structured interviews. While if we need quantitative or numerical data or data in numbers, we will generally make use of the scale-based questionnaires. Similarly, the depth of information that we need, that also is an important aspect of the criteria. So if we are interested in detailed responses, we will make use of, and if we are interested in exploring the issue in depth, we will need semi-structured interviews. On the other hand, if the depth that we need is low, in that case we will make use of fixed questions or fixed options, such as in the quantitative questionnaires. Flexibility is another aspect of the criteria that will help us whether to use semi-structured interviews or scale-based questionnaires. So generally, we will need semi-structured structured interviews if we need high flexibility or more flexibility, and we want, for example, we need to follow up with additional questions. And on the other hand, because the nature of scale-based questionnaire is fixed, so there is low flexibility there. Time and cost. Generally, qualitative research interviews or semi-structured interviews need more time and often involves more cost because of the direct involvement or sometimes travel to places of the researcher. On the other hand, in terms of time and cost, generally the questionnaire, the scale-based questionnaire are more efficient. Sample size, generally, because the qualitative data is in-depth, we need smaller samples to collect in-depth data from the respondents. While in terms of sample size, Generally, there is larger sample when we are collecting data from on the basis of scale-based questionnaires. Then ease of data analysis. Generally, qualitative data is easy to collect, but when it comes to analysis, it's more complex, and because thematic analysis is involved. On the other hand, statistical analysis, generally the categories are already pre-decided and the data is in numbers, so we just need calculations, and so statistical analysis make it a bit straightforward and simpler process in comparison to the thematic analysis that is needed in qualitative studies. Then subjectivity. Generally, because the semi-structured interviews are conducted by the researchers on their own, and they have the flexibility to include questions or to exclude questions, keeping in view their perceptions of the responses that are coming from the respondents. So that's why there is more interviewer influence, and we could also say that there is some level of subjectivity, although subjectivity and objectivity could be debated further. And then this subjectivity is lower in the case of scale-based questionnaires, where the responses are based or actually based on predetermined criteria or structure. So the next one is comparability. Generally, comparison across the data that we get from the respondents is lower in the semi-structured interviews, while there is more standardization of responses. So there could be more comparison or quantitative comparison in the data that is coming based on scale-based questionnaires. Now, the main topic basically is the strength and limitations. So generally, semi-structured interviews have certain strengths and certain limitations, and similarly, the scale-based questionnaires have certain strengths and certain limitations. And so the researchers need to make wise decisions in terms of using either one or the other one. It will depend on several factors, including the objectives of the research design, and the particular setting in which we are making use of these data collection tools. The strengths of semi-structured interviews, for example, involve that semi-structured interviews provide us in-depth insights into social phenomena, into our questions and objectives. Semi-structured interviews are more flexible, and so we can make changes to the schedule, we can add questions, we can reduce the number of questions that we ask, keeping in view the kind of data that is coming up. Similarly, the other strength of semi-structured interview is that it allows for clarifications of the questions that might immediately arise in the minds of the researchers or the interviewers, and so there are also chances for probes. So overall, the strength of the semi-structured interviews actually come from the flexibility of its nature and from the openness, and also because such interviews generally take place in a more natural environment, and so in a more open and interactive type of environment. The limitations of this is that in many cases semi-structured interviews are time consuming, so you have to give quite a substantial amount of time to each of the individual that you are interviewing. As a result, and secondly, we can then collect data from smaller samples, and so there could be element of generalizability or lack of generalizability of our findings, although that basically is not the aim of qualitative studies. There could also be potential interviewer bias, where interviewers are asking selected questions or responding to certain answers from the participants, or maybe when they are actually analyzing the data. In that sense as well, they could be selective in terms of coming up with themes or providing evidence. And lastly, Limitations also include in semi-structured interview the complexity of, in terms both of conducting interviews and then organizing and analyzing data and coming up with themes. It's a complex process, so that could be one of the possible limitations. On the other hand, scale-based questionnaires also have certain strengths and weaknesses. Strengths include the simplicity that is involved. So once you prepare the questionnaires, it's quite simple to collect data, just handing these over to the respondents to fill them. Then the second strength is we could collect data from larger samples and so greater generalizations. Easy to compare results across the respondents because of the involvement of numbers. And lastly, generalizability is something that gives strength to, because theory generation or generalization is an important aspect of science or theory building. That is why this is one of the strengths. On the other hand, its limitations include that it does not give depth, the kind of depth that we get from data that we get through semi-structured interviews. Then there is lack of flexibility, because this is actually not a face-to-face situation. Once you hand over or send questionnaires to the respondents, there is no flexibility. They just have to respond in line with the scale. And so there could be response bias as well as one of the limitations. Now, generally the suitability of the method, either the use of semi-structured interviews or scale-based questionnaires. So when can we make use of the one and the other one? There could also be certain research designs where we can make use of both, such as in the mixed method research designs. So if we are interested in in-depth understanding of opinions and experiences, we should make use of semi-structured interviews. Also, if you are interested in exploring more complex, sensitive issues, personalized issues, such as psychological issues or phenomenological type of topics, we can make use of semi-structured interviews. On the other hand, if we are interested in measuring attitudes and trends across a large sample, we will make use of scale-based questionnaires. We will also make use of scale-based questionnaires if we want to compare data across different groups on a larger scale. And lastly, we will do well to make use of scale-based questionnaires when we want to get quick and cost-effective data collection for our research studies. So to summarize, we can say that the suitability of data collection method actually depends on several factors, including the aims and objectives of our research, our access to data. It also depends on our research questions. It depends on our resources as well. But most importantly, it depends on the main objectives of our research. So we need to make suitable use of the data collection tools. Every data collection tool has its pluses and minuses, or strengths and limitations. And so good researchers, intelligent researchers, make intelligent use of these data collection tools.